Caitlin, you're someone who's extremely knowledgeable about autism. You've worked with families to improve challenging behaviors and help autistic children thrive using applied behavior analysis for the past 15 years. So I'm curious, how come it took you so long to get the autism diagnosis yourself?
So I'm laughing because I think that it is potentially so autistic to work with a bunch of autistic people and not realize, connect the dots until like much later. But yes, I've worked extensively with people with autism, all ages, all different levels of support needs. And beyond the fact that I always just really got along very well with my clients and kind of seemed to really work very, very well with non-speaking clients because there's a vibe. I don't know, I can't explain it. I feel like it's just an autism thing maybe. My entire mental health and neurodivergent journey got a late start to begin with because I was not diagnosed with ADHD until I was 31 and then my autism diagnosis this year at 36. So it's not as common knowledge for people to recognize autistic symptoms in women and girls. They do present differently in women and girls, you know? So and we are definitely socialized to behave a certain way and to
Ask a lot more.
ask and just mold yourself, kind of tap, I'm like thinking of, like a sculptor, right? Like just tap the rock off those rough edges that have to do with social skills deficits, that have to do with like missing social cues. You just kind of learn to either fool people or use some kind of defense mechanism to kind of like, I'm funny. And there's a reason why I'm funny. It's not just because I'm naturally witty, it's because socially, that's what has gotten me the furthest, essentially.
But
So
as an adult,
uh,
what was your motivation for you seeking this diagnosis? Because you no longer have the benefits of having an IEP, an individualized education plan, and all the other services that kids usually get.
for me, it was more wanting to confirm my suspicion. I've always flapped my hands when I'm excited. I'll do a little hop and I'll flap. If I really let myself unmask, there's a silly sound that comes out with it. I really just wanted medical confirmation that what I had suspected and what I've done so much research on and what I've had so much exposure to throughout my career, that it wasn't just me, and that there was an explanation for the things that were going on with me that weren't already explained. I think a lot of adults who do seek diagnosis, it's not necessarily that they're looking for support services, I guess, especially if they're low support needs like me, but it's more like, yeah, those people you think that are your people, those are for sure your people. You can go over there and you can have fun with those people. There is a really mixed reaction to self-diagnosis. I completely understand why people self-diagnose. I was self-diagnosed for a time too. There are a lot of people that don't have access to this assessment process, to a doctor who can diagnose them. So there's a lot of reasons really why self-diagnosis is so popular. Just the fact that a lot of times autistic women show up and they don't get a diagnosis because the doctor's like, "You don't look autistic." Like, "What?" And that was almost the case for me too. He said, You can have conversations and you make eye contact." I said, "Well, what about all this other stuff?"
Yeah, I'm definitely not recommending anyone self-diagnose for medical conditions. But
Right.
what are some of the challenges, barriers for adults trying to get an autism diagnosis?
Well, I think the first one is even knowing that there's something to diagnose. I mean, you live in your own head. You can't compare your experience to other people's unless there's a level of knowledge that those 2 perspectives are very, very different. And so for me, it wasn't really until I hit like adulthood and corporate leadership level that I went, "Oh, I don't understand this. I don't understand this political game. I don't know what is going on. I am beyond my depth. What is going on? What is happening?" And yeah, and I have no problem disclosing, like, it's not a big deal to me. I want it to be out in the open. I want people to know. I want people to also do their own research if they're really feeling like, it's a feeling. It's not just like a, "Oh, maybe it's a passing." No, it's like you read these symptoms and you read through these things and go, wait, other people experience that? Wait, what? It's mind blowing. It's crazy. I mean, yeah. So anyway, like you said, I think it's important not to, you don't want to self diagnose and then go treat yourself by your self diagnosis, right? So it was important for me to self diagnose and then, confirm with a medical
Yeah,
diagnosis. But
that
that
only
took
starts the process, right?
it took multiple insurance changes to the point where I could get an assessment. It was just a whole big mess. So there's recognizing that something is off and that there might actually be a reason why you struggle with certain things. And then the process of even going to a doctor is really difficult for some people. I've been in mental health forever, but there's a lot of people that don't want to necessarily go check out whatever symptoms they're having. We have cultural stigmas. We have, shoot, I know in some Eastern cultures, there are really, really severe social consequences to having someone in your family who has a disability. It affects marriageability and family lines and all kinds of stuff. So, people have varying levels of comfort when it comes to even acknowledging that there might be something, and then the healthcare system itself is just it's not really set up for, I think, people in general, but people with disabilities, it's extra a little bit more difficult. And there's just so many places where that process can snag. There's, getting the authorization. There's getting the actual assessment done. There's them testing properly. There's, that does that diagnosing doctor, do they have they worked with adults with autism before? Do they know about autism?
Yeah, and you're right. Not every doctor knows about autism, especially
And
internationally.
absolutely, and even in the United States, and I'm a native English speaker, I have insurance, I have, compared to so many people, I have so many resources. I'm educated, I know my way around the system enough. But that doesn't mean that if the system mistreats you or they deny something off the cuff, like, do you really have the resources inside to now go through that process of appealing and da da da? It's just very discouraging, and I can only imagine for families who just a don't have as much access to resources and b don't speak the language. It's how are you supposed to navigate that? So, and I think that's, coming back to self-diagnosis, I think that's why self-diagnosis has become so popular. I mean, especially with social media.
Now, lack of access is a huge problem.
It's a huge problem. It's like, what else are you supposed to do if you are a weird kid and you feel weird and you can't figure out why you feel different and it's causing you suffering?
Now, you're a board certified behavior analyst and you teach kids with autism all these positive coping skills. So you already have a lot of coping strategies in your arsenal. You can recognize like stimming and all these different signs, right? But many parents, I noticed just from working with kids with autism, that in families with kids with autism, there's oftentimes one or both parents or other family members who also exhibit many similar traits, but they're
Mhm.
usually not formally diagnosed. What are, is there benefits to having other family members be diagnosed?
I think I can speak. So yes and no, and I think there are, let's say a child is autistic and they have a parent who's also autistic. Trying to think of what we were just talking about. Yes and no. Is there a benefit? So it
And
depends. I think it just depends on the family, on the people. I think for me, it's very helpful to have kind of picked out the people in my family that we can trace the autism through a particular line of my family. And so it's kind of nice just to know, like, hey, you're just one of the other neurodivergent people in the family. But I think that I mean, there are a lot of people who get their child diagnosed and then get their autism diagnosis because they didn't realize that they have autism. But I would think that it has to do more with someone's motivation. like you asked me about in the beginning, is it something that they accept? Is it something that they want to know more about? Is it something that needs to be treated as not a disability, as, something where you can skill build to alleviate certain symptoms, things like that, or symptoms or characteristics.
So an argument could be made if someone has already made it into adulthood without intervention as an authentic adult. Doesn't that mean that that individual is doing fine?
No.
What are some
So
possible consequences for
so
ignoring the issue?
heavy, high masking for long periods of time, so trying to blend in the regular world to your own detriment, right?
It can really increase anxiety and the stress level, right?
I came to curaJOY after I left my career because I hit autistic burnout, and it has taken me now over 2 years to overcome. It took really taking a lot off of my plate for the last year to really start being able to function again, because imagine. I'm trying to think of, like, what would be a good example. It's like living on overdrive for 30 years and then just completely fizzling out, losing skills, losing memory, it just messes a person up. So, and I think that there are definitely people who mask better than others, more easily than others. Maybe it doesn't take them quite as much energy.
No matter what, it does take a
A,
mental energy to mask.
a
And if
lot of
you
it.
don't need to be overwhelmed, why do that to yourself?
Exactly. So yeah, so working remotely actually became a very necessary piece of the puzzle for me to just kind of be able to relax and rest and give my brain and my body the space to just breathe, because it really does feel like you're holding your breath for years almost. And I didn't have the tools or the help to be able to pace myself or manage. I think, yeah, cool, I made it to my I got my master's degree, I got my board certification, I've had a successful career that I so much enjoy, but that's come at a huge price. And it came eventually to the price of my mental health, where I had to make the choice between, do I do this do I do this for money, or do I do this so that I can stay alive, you know? And I think it's always a better choice to choose your mental health.
To be alive first.
Yeah, I can have money later. It's all good. Like, I'll be back. But yeah, the benefit, I think the main benefit to just knowing as an adult is to be able to seek out those resources that do make sense. When I am in some Reddit groups for women with autism, women with I know we don't use Asperger's anymore, but there are some people who still identify with the term Asperger's. So it's awesome. It's like going to a world where everyone makes sense, because, like, oh, wow, these are people that think in the same kind of way that I do. Not necessarily that we have the same opinions on everything, but that the way that we reason, the way that we logic, the way that we form opinions and kind of things is different from the general public. And to be able to be in that space and feel not normal, but feel effective, feel
That
included,
brings me to another
feel.
topic. What resources do adults who have been recently diagnosed have?
That's a really good question. I know for sure that there is, as far as services go, people who qualify can still access, potentially social skills groups, that kind of thing. I think it gets really tough as you get into your older adulthood. I don't know that people care as much. It makes a little bit more sense for a 17 or 18 or 25-year-old to be in a social skills group. But I would say, honestly, the biggest wealth of resources is online. It's in autistic YouTube content creators
So
and
there's no ABA for adults.
so I've actually done ABA with a couple of adults in the past, but we're working more on functional daily skills. These are not these clients that I had that continued to qualify for services up through their
Mhm.
20s. We're not the focus of the program, the learning was more on getting through those, daily life skills. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's a meetup group, maybe there feel like you're kind of on your own if you're an autistic adult. Like, it's kind of like, "Here's the knowledge, here's the information about you. Now go do something with it.
But
Go
if we're
use."
talking about science, wouldn't ABA still work for adults?
Absolutely, and ABA works for all kinds of organisms, all humans
Yeah,
included.
because ABA
Um
doesn't just work for autistic kids, right? They work
Right,
for sports
exactly.
performance and HR.
And so yeah, exactly, and so the kind of ABA that would apply to me is honestly the exact same ABA that would apply to anybody else. Goal setting, taking that behavioral data, practicing things in role play, and then practicing them in a real situation, and then getting feedback.
Can you give me a concrete example of that role play feedback?
Yeah, definitely. So, one example would be I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head, sorry. Wait, what was the question again? Sorry.
Can you give me a concrete example of what you mean by role playing, giving feedback, how that benefits
Oh,
an autistic
okay.
adult?
Gotcha. So role play can be really effective if you're going to be going into some kind of social situation. A lot of autistic people and family members of autistic people are really familiar with the term scripting. Scripts can be very, very helpful to kind of already have an idea going into a situation of what you're going to say. So let's say, a lot of people are very afraid to go up and order at a restaurant. So one, way to do that would be, have a friend come play the waiter, and they can tell you exactly what to say, like, okay, you'll look at the menu and then, pick the thing that you want, and you can just point to it. You don't even have to say anything. Let's practice. And so this could be a family member. It could be, I guess you could do it in the mirror too. I don't know if that works for people, but the goal is to practice using the skill in a fake situation and then put it to work in the real situation. So you would, learn to look at the menu, pick the thing that you want, point to it in a fake scenario, and then go out to a restaurant and try
But
it
when you
there.
talk about it like that, it doesn't sound so taboo, like mental health taboo, because that sounds like what people do for public speaking. You train to give a
Exactly.
speech. Yeah, like
And
that.
and that is such a good point because behavior is all behavior. What you just mentioned, which was oh my God, Caitlin, practicing for public speaking, right? Practice and connecting with success are everything that we need in order to learn, in order to pick up new skills, whether that be public speaking or, ordering from a waiter at a restaurant or brushing your teeth or incorporating teeth brushing into your routine.
Yeah,
Um,
and building up that repertoire of positive experiences
right,
also
exactly.
solidify a person's self-esteem.
Exactly, because the way that we learn is we do something and there's a payoff of some kind. We typically don't do things for no payoff. Humans are actually organisms. Organisms that live are pretty smart and they figure out pretty quick not to do what doesn't work. So it really does come, I mean, and for every individual, the individual components might look a little bit different. Everybody responds to different things as far as motivators. Everybody responds, they have their own likes and dislikes, their own personal stress, threshold and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's the same principles apply all over. It really just some people pick it up quick, some people pick it up slow, some people need a lot of practice, some people don't. You've been playing piano for how long? How many years?
I lost count. It's more than 20 some years.
Right. So you went through behavioral skills training with piano and, to become a concert pianist.
Yeah,
She's amazing, by the
everything
way.
takes a lot of practice.
Right? A lot of practice and you start small. You start with learning your scales and where the notes are and everything, and then start doing drills as you get a little bit more, I mean, I'm not explaining this to you because obviously but for the people who are
But
watching,
it is universal.
it is universal. It is the same, it's the same it's the same equation essentially for everything. And if
You
we
build up the skill, you practice it until it becomes so ingrained that even under stress, even when you're not doing so well, that skill still kicks in and
exactly, and
helps
that's
saves you.
yeah, and that's what we refer to as mastery. Really being able to pull that skill out so quickly in any situation that it is called for in. And for most of the population, shoot,
No stress. There's video editing.
that's all right. It was a good one, but let's see. What was I thinking about? Most of the population. Oh, I was gonna say, so for most of the population, people are pretty able to just naturally take a skill that they've learned in one setting and apply it in other different settings or with other different people or in different locations. Most of the time people can pretty easily do that, but for people with learning differences and autism, ADHD, different neurotypes, that generalization can be a hard thing, and it can be a hard thing for younger people too. You think about, like, little kids who are starting to learn the rules of society. It's a process, and it requires instruction in those different environments, right? Like, you don't tell a kid to have an inside voice in one setting and then expect them to always have an inside voice. Like, what if they don't know they're supposed to be quiet at the library? Well, you gotta give it to them there. Okay, what if they don't know that it also applies at the movie theater? Okay, you gotta give it to them there too.
Right.
So, having the ability to practice not only in those contrived and then natural situations, but all kinds of different natural situations that call for that skill to be expressed is very important as well. So,
So thank you for sharing. And we'll continue. I mean, this is a topic that's really worth discussing and it's not talked about enough. We'll continue talking about this in future episodes.
hey, thanks for the chat, Caitlin.
Okay, I have another question that we probably will put in another episode. I'm gonna ask you about, and we can do this another time. Kids who have ABA therapy, but due to cultural differences, they're kids. We started getting some youth interns. They're writing essays. So you have kids on the spectrum who have gotten ABA therapy, and they're pretty well adjusted, but they have parents or somebody in the family who older generation who are not diagnosed and not well adjusted.
Mhm.
How does that family dynamic hurt the progress of the kid who's, I mean, because you're,
If the basically if the parents are just kind of a mess.
yeah, because it like you're you're getting two reinforcers for behaviors, right?
Yeah, it causes, like, huge problems. Basically, I mean, just the inconsistency across different people is, like, I don't know if I'm, like, starting to answer your question. Can
You are. I'm just trying to get at, like, if you have an autistic kid who is diagnosed and has services,
Yeah.
and one of the parent is not diagnosed, how would ABA even be successful?
Oh, if one of the parents isn't diagnosed, how would ABA be successful for their autistic kid?
Right.
Oh, do you mean, like, working how do you work with families who, like, are not completely mentally.
Right. And because you wouldn't have, or how do you work in situations where there's failed parent training?
And this is a whole 'nother ball of wax, this kind of decision making that comes with the family system and breakdowns in the family system. There have been plenty of times where I've worked with families that they honestly they didn't really want the help. Like, they didn't really want someone to come work with their kid and cause behaviors and do all this. They just wanted somebody to be there. And when we can't get them to if I can't get parents to engage in parent training, then there's really no point in the services, in my opinion. Like, it's unless they're with someone else for, their whole day, there is
You can
no
implement the bib.
yes,
There's other,
there's absolutely no point in implementing a BIP with one person if the other person isn't gonna do it at all. You're gonna get a kid who responds really well to one person and then is a total mess elsewhere. But then the kid is also absorbing all of that, like, oh, there's different rules here, and I can press mom this way and I can press dad that way, and then they'll fight. And then I'm off
I mean,
doing
kids are really smart, and
yeah, they're
that's an
super
issue we
smart.
see a lot.
Yeah, and so there have actually been I had a family that I worked with where the kid really needed intervention. He was relatively low support needs in that he was really verbal and he could do his, like, self-care stuff. It was mostly social and just behavioral. But the source of all of the behavioral turmoil was the parents' relationship. It was 2 moms, and he lived with one mom who was kind of the one who, like, held everything down, and then there was the other mom lived elsewhere and had some kind of personality disorder. Like, it was a really big, like, I really enjoyed doing this assessment because I was like, "What am I gonna do?" Like, if I recommend the things that I would normally recommend, like, I can't get around the person who has a personality disorder who denies that anything is wrong and gives him everything he wants, and I have no control over that. What am I gonna do? So, I recommended actually parent training to begin with because I wanted mom to be able to learn how to collect her own behavior data. I wanted her to be able to demonstrate to the court the behavior increases that happen after, it's like, I I'm gonna teach you, mom, how to get the information that you need to keep your son in a good spot. Because your partner just lies and lies and lies and lies and lies, and the judge knows that, and I know that, and you know that, but more proof is always gonna be good. So and we worked on just reducing some of the primary caregiver reactions to challenging behavior. We worked on her implementing a daily schedule for him. So really just a lot of kind of easy fixes, things that I would consider an easy fix where, it is just kind of taking up some triggers and giving him some different ways to know what to expect and when we're going to do homework and when we're going to play, and that was really helpful for him.
You
And
don't mind it. What are some keys to success for parent training, and where do you see them failing most of the time?
Mhm. So I would say keys to success would be having an open mind, but also being an active participant. Parents do have to, on some level, want to understand why their child behaves the way they do, what their kid is trying to say to them. And if there isn't that basic level of curiosity, and the autism is just kind of this annoying thing that everybody hopes will go away, that is usually a good indicator of whether parent training is going to be successful or fail. Just kind of attitudes coming in, what their understanding of autism is. What is autism? Where does it come from? What does it look like? What does it do? Where does it, how long does it last? How
So that's where a lot of education is needed, because a lot of parents think
much?
I need treatment for 6 months and then the autism is going to disappear.
Right, which, we don't even need to get rid of autism. Autism is cool, but autism can carry some behaviors and characteristics that are not so cool. So, yeah, shoot, I'm losing it. What were we just talking about?
Keys to success.
Oh, keys to success. That's right. So yeah, I mean, I think on that level, parents they have to want us to be there. It's a lot of times I feel like parents get hooked up with ABA services for their kid, but nobody even tells them what ABA is. No one tells them why it might be beneficial. They basically get through the insurance authorization process and they get an autism diagnosis, and the doctor says, cool, you need, not cool, the doctor says you need ABA or your child needs ABA, and then they show up at the door of ABA, and then this
But I can give you a parent's perspective, because
yeah,
from parents' perspective, they're already overwhelmed and stressed, and things are not going
right.
well. They're given this therapy, and it's pretty intrusive. Someone comes
Yes.
and multiple people come into your home hours and hours every day, and but they can't tell you when things are going to get better. It is a lot of work, and oftentimes, most of the time, behaviors get worse.
Yep.
right? And it affects the entire family now, siblings, everyone's stressed.
And that's why I think the process of informed consent with parents needs to be very, very, very thorough. That is something that I always
What do you
was
mean by informed consent? Is this something other than the long pages of medical documents that people have to sign?
or you guys all signed it. Y'all signed it.
I
Yeah.
think it's a good question though, because parents, I'm sure a lot of parents don't want ABA because of this.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's what I okay, so informed consent. Parents, I don't think that most ABA providers do. I don't well, I think it starts with the insurance company since that is the first go between. But I don't think a lot of ABA providers do a great job at really spelling out what these services entail, what the commitment that you're making as a family really is, because like you said, like it's a whole lot of stuff. ABA is very demanding of families. It is very demanding of time. It's very demanding of, just like normal family moments and weekends and
Yeah, it's
afternoons.
very effective, but as with anything effective, it is a lot of work.
It has a price, it takes a toll. So that was another thing, like you mentioned, the behaviors get worse. Like families really need to know all of these things before they go in and have a couple days to marinate on it before they even decide, yes, this is for us. But I think it falls to the providers to really convey that information, because I think the worst thing is when we get services started and then find 6 months later, after there's been friction and a lot of cancellations and, it's just not quite working out. And that conversation, if it happens then, which is like, hey, is this really a good fit? Do you want these services? Because I'm not going to tell you, not gonna force you to have my services. It doesn't benefit anybody if everybody doesn't want to be on this particular team for this particular reason. So it's a huge waste of time and resources and family time, and it's just a huge waste of everyone's time to get services started and then find a couple weeks in that, wow, this is not what we expected at all.
And so improvements can definitely be made there. The kid getting services need reinforcement. So do the parents.
Yeah, and a lot of priming, a lot of education, a lot of information, the behavioral procedures that do cause behaviors to go up through that process we call extinction, is something that should be very heavily discussed with a family before we decide to, take crying episodes from 2 minutes up to 30 minutes. Let's all be on the level before we crank it to a level that is physiologically painful for parents to endure, and for kids, that is potentially even traumatic. So, yeah, I mean, people be out there running procedures that they didn't fully inform the family about what that was gonna be like, and I think that's really unfair.
No, our time's out, but I'd love to talk to you next time about the bad rep that ABA has gotten.
Yeah, so we'll revisit that. I definitely have a lot of things to say about it. It's been a great conversation. I know we'll pick back up at a later date.
Right. Thank you, Caitlin.